All praise is due to Allah. Assalamu alaikum and greetings be unto you. I am Anisa Muhammad, your host of Minding My Mind. Tonight's guest is Sister Dr. Christina Parks. Dr. Parks graduated from the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire in 1992 with a double major in biochemistry and molecular biology. She went on to earn her PhD in cellular and molecular biology from the University of Michigan in 1999. She did her graduate research in the field of cytokine signaling and with the focus on elucidating the mechanisms by which genes are regulated, which means how they get turned on, how they get turned off. Dr. Parks has spent many years studying the biochemistry of how pharmaceuticals as well as natural substances that enter our bodies affect the expression of genes and biochemical pathways that are essential to our health and well being. Go ahead, Sister Dr. Parks. Dr.
Thank you.
Park's focus is on supporting the body in activating its natural detoxification and healing pathways through bringing signaling pathways back into balance. We got to give it up for Sister Dr. Christina Parks and her studies. And our topic for discussion this evening is nutrition, saving our future generations. You know, Sister Christina, the more I study anatomy, physiology, and now I've become kind of nerdy with this biochemistry and how it relates to us being able to balance what we eat with nutrition. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that eating to live or how to eat to live is the best way and the only way that we will be able to have life and have it more abundantly. So I would like very much to find out from you. Are you ready to delve into this topic of nutrition and how being mindful of nutrition that we will be able to save our future generations?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. I've been studying nutrition for about 30 years now.
Ooh, that's a long time, but ooh,
Yeah,
sis,
I'm very passionate about it.
yes, ma'am. That's wonderful. And so I know that one of the things that made me interested in this topic was a condition that I had, I say had past tense, that is diverticulosis. And I was told when I was diagnosed several years ago, over 10 years ago, that it was going to be permanent, that if there was no treatment for it, that there was no cure for it. I would just have to learn to live with it. But by reapplying, and when I say reapplying, I mean that one of the reasons why my gut health deteriorated was because I was not practicing how to eat to live the way that I should have been. And I
Yes,
have to
ma'am.
take responsibility for that because the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad are 100% right and exact. But I know that over the years, I've learned to study my body and understand what works and what does not work. And I know the last CT scan that I received, I was told that the damage that was there in the past is no longer present.
All praise due to Allah. That's
All praise
wonderful.
is due to Allah. So, with me evolving into from coming out of a healthcare background, I wanted to become a doula so that I can do something to help mothers to bring healthy babies into the world because I have read several peer-reviewed articles with regard to fetal brain development and nutrition, um, and how poor nutrition kind of contributes to what they call ADD and ADHD. And I want you to, if you can elaborate a little bit on that, that would be very helpful to me to help me to understand and help our listeners as well.
Sure. So, brain development, your brain is made out of fat. And in our modern world, if you think about a lot of the snacks that we eat, like chips or, corn chips or potato chips, popcorn, a lot of these different things are high in seed oils. And if we had a more ancestral diet or a more natural diet, they would be balanced. But because we get a bottle of like corn oil off the shelf or soy oil or like, even sunflower oil, all of those are from seeds and they're high in a fatty acid called omega 6s. And
Mm-hmm.
it throws our body's balance off. And so one of the things that they found over and over again for the infant brain is they need enough omega 3s that we typically get from things like fish or even grass fed cows from their milk. And so that because even like with the cows or the chickens, a lot of the times if you're eating eggs or something, if they're fed a bunch of grains, then they have too many seed oils in their diet. So they're giving them in their foods as well. So many people are going back to like grass fed, beef, grass fed milk, grass fed butter that's going to be higher in these omega 3s. And study after study shows that that is one of the clear things that clearly impacts the baby's brain development and is directly correlated with their intelligence, is whether they have enough of these healthy fats. And so a lot of times we think that we'll go on like trendy diets. Well, I'm just going to eat like whatever it is, like these low fat diets or no fat diets. And we're not vegans, right? And
Right.
and what I've told many people, especially with regard to maternal nutrition, in fact, I'm coming out with, I just did a lecture for my mosque, moving away from meat wisely. And for maternal nutrition, it's so, so important to have those nutrients to give to your child that you really want to, either make sure you don't want to be vegan, you can do your milks and your butter and things like that. But what you can also do is, sometimes you may need meat. And the reason for that is because, as you said before, we are not doing eat to live correctly, right? We think we are often. And sometimes in some of the guidance, we don't see the details. And because I've studied nutrition for 30 years, when I read Eat to Live, I said I can validate 85% of this, not because I was taught it in school, but because I studied nutrition for 20 years after I got out of school and went to the deepest levels of what is your cell membrane made out of? Where are we getting these things? So, for example, if you're pregnant or you're going to be nursing, iron deficiency is one of the critical problems. Iron and zinc deficiencies are probably on a vegetarian, or maybe some people are doing these like trendy vegan diets, can be critical deficiencies. Now, if you eat a bunch of seeds have something called phytates in them. And we call them anti-nutrients, and they bind minerals. So when you have a seed, it doesn't just germinate whenever. It has to have very specific conditions. And in fact, it has to be soaked, and enzymes have to come in and neutralize those phytates so that the plant can actually access its own minerals. So if you just grind up those seeds and eat them, you are actually it's going to bind any minerals that are in your gut, any minerals that are in your food. So, and any minerals that are in that seed. So that's why we soak our navy beans, right? And that's why we're supposed to ferment our bread to liberate those minerals. So if we're just eating bread off the shelf, not only are we not able to access the minerals such as iron or whatever, or zinc that might be in the bread, we are actually maybe binding other, like maybe we are eating something else. We may be like, say we soak our navy beans, but we're eating it with, let's say, farina muffins instead of sourdough bread. We're told to sour our bread. If we do it once, fine. But if we're doing it every night, the farina muffins are actually maybe preventing us from absorbing the iron and zinc from the navy beans.
Wow. So how does everything that you just said, can you elaborate a little bit on how that would contribute? Because let me just ask this question. Is it true that poor nutrition, that ADD, ADHD, and situations of that nature, does it mimic poor nutrition?
So they're directly from poor nutrition. But here's the thing. Sometimes it might be what you're not eating, like you're not getting enough nutritious food. Sometimes it might be that your gut microbiome is off, right? So it's poor nutrition, but it's also a hyperinflammatory state because of toxins that the mother passes from her body to the infant's body. So if she has not detoxed prior to conception, a mom detoxes into the baby. So if she has any heavy metals, if she has endocrine disruptors, in fact, 1 in 4 American women were found to have enough endocrine disruptors to feminize their male offspring, to feminize their boys that they were gestating. So if she hasn't tried to pull that garbage out of her system prior to conception, all of those toxins go into the baby. And you can imagine it's very hard to develop with all of these toxins. The average baby is born with over 300 toxins in them nowadays.
Really?
Yeah. So I really advocate, one, you've got to detox all of these things from your body. You've got to get your microbiome going on. And so like navy beans are a great thing to feed your microbiome. But so I want to differentiate. So one of the biggest things that you can do for the intelligence and for neural development is to have really healthy fats. But of course, iron is essential for oxygen transport, right?
Right.
And if the baby's not getting enough iron, they may not getting enough oxygen to their brain, like literally, right? They may be highly anemic. So this is actually a critical issue. It's really tricky to supplement with iron. So like just running out and getting an iron, it can actually be really inflammatory too. It can cause constipation in you. And if you have a young baby, it can cause constipation in the baby as well. So this is where, for me, as we move away from meat wisely, if you are, like you said, you weren't really doing the diet, while we are sort of reestablishing Eat to Live, as you have said, and
Yes,
as we're learning the nuance to this, like that, yes, we're supposed to be fermenting our bread. I can't tell you how many believers don't know that. Like they just didn't, they didn't see it in the guidance. And so I see it because I know what has to be done to make this food bioavailable, to make these nutrients able to be absorbed. But until we kind of gain that nuance, I get very concerned if a mother tells me that they're just not eating meat, because I know that they're likely not doing all the other nuanced things in Eat to Live yet that would really support proper nutrition.
Okay, wow, that's a lot. You said a mouthful, dear sister, really, as it specifically relates to the the gut biome and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
having
Yeah.
so many endocrine disruptors and things that we are eating that we are not aware of that are endocrine disruptors, and it's like a cascade of things happening inside our body on a chemical
Exactly.
level. And your
There
body,
are. And so I've like counseled quite a few believers, because like most of them are like really good hearted. And actually the people I know are really pretty compliant, right? They're trying to be compliant. And when I say, did you know that like if you eat too many sunflower seeds, you're going to be high in omega-6, that's bad for you. That's going to cause inflammation during fasting. That's going to cause pain during fasting. It's not that sunflower seeds are inherently bad. It's just that you're eating too many, right? Because, maybe they feel like I can't eat other snacks. So they thought if it says it's permissible, then I can eat as many as I want. No, so especially, and this is about maternal health. And so
yes,
where,
yes.
it's one thing to kind of like mess up a little bit and you're like, oh, my health's not right. When we're at that critical bringing a new life in, we don't want to play with that. We want to make sure that that baby's getting what they need. One of the healthiest sorts of fats that are going to make up that baby's brain, that are going to make up every cell in that baby's body, is the egg yolk. Egg yolks are extremely nutritious. In fact, I'm doing 2 posts. I did one last week and I'm doing one this week on how to make custard. Custard has egg yolks, it has milk, it has, let's see, and then I'm trying to think of what it's cornstarch. It's really simple, actually. But those egg yolks are so nutrient dense. And like sometimes we try to get our fats from plant sources, and seeds are not a good source of fat. Okay. That's why we're told butter again and again, butter. Butter is an excellent source of fat. But when you're building a whole new child, those egg yolks have vitamin A, they have vitamin D, they have phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine that's making up that baby's nervous system and their brain. And so when we in the late 80s and 90s, like, do you know what hollandaise sauce is?
Yes.
Okay, so back then everybody knew what it was. It was actually quite popular. I love it because they would put it on eggs Benedict, and it's traditional on asparagus. Well, I live in Michigan where we have tons of asparagus farms, so we just had like fresh asparagus. So I picked some up at a roadside stand, and I made some hollandaise sauce. It's basically egg yolks, and then you mix in a little lemon, some salt, and you add butter to it. And it's amazing. It's like rich and creamy and savory and, you know, a little bit lemony, and you pour it over your eggs Benedict or over you. And it's actually pretty easy to make. But because we went to that low fat craze where we were afraid that everything with fat in it was bad, we demonized eggs when those egg yolks are some of the healthiest foods for babies. And when you do it, when you make like a custard or a hollandaise sauce, you cook the yolks so slowly that they don't, like, you know, turn into that hard, crunchy yolk like in a boiled egg. And that allows those healthy fats, the phospholipids that make up every cell membrane and make up the brain, to be more accessible to the body, to that infant, to absorb those healthy fats. So for brain development and for ADHD, two main things. One, making sure you have healthy fats and the omega-3s. And two, lowering inflammation, lowering inflammation, lowering inflammation. And mom can do that herself because the baby gets all her biochemistry. So if mom's inflamed, the baby's
inflamed. Yes.
Right. And mom's immune system is going to kind of carry to the baby, and the baby also gets their microbiome from mom. So reducing inflammation, and nutrition is huge in reducing inflammation, you know, cutting back on sugars, cutting back on seed oils, cutting back on all these snacky foods that we eat. And the thing is, traditional societies would prepare nutritionally for pregnancy for 3 years. They would actually trek all the way. Let's say they lived in the middle of it, I don't know, India or like Kazakhstan, somewhere right like in the middle of the land. They would go all the way to the coast to get seafoods that they knew were high in iodine, because they knew iodine was essential to proper reproductive function, right? So these traditional societies, and this is where getting back to the role of the woman, how important the womb is. In our society, we've kind of changed that and made it like how important getting this really important job is, right?
Yeah.
Instead
let me ask you this. I know that when they're talking about endocrine disruptors, and first of all, thank you so much for your input, because I know that a lot has changed since I was a little girl with regard to food and where food comes from. And that has changed the flavor and the taste of foods.
Oh, that's for sure.
And we have become addicted, meaning society, not just the followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
Well,
and I
all
can't
of
say
us,
that they're addicted. I'm talking about everybody that depends upon this system of things for their livelihood, for what it is that they eat, which goes back to the point of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad saying that we need to have our own land so that we can produce our own food. Now, the question that I would like to ask you is if you could elaborate on the truth about our bodies being chemical processing plants. And I'm asking that question because I'm really into studying the colors of food, the color spectrum of God's creation, and what it is that we're supposed to eat for a healthy body, and how, especially when it comes to neurotransmitters and the signaling that happens. So show us the difference between how it would work in an ideal world and how the disruption can happen by way of eating improper food.
Well, Oh my goodness, that's so much. I'm trying to think of the simplest way to do it, and I'm not sure there is. One of the big things is if you're eating any kind of industrialized food, it has glyphosate on it, which is Roundup. And that's one of the reasons I grow all my own food. I grow all my own navy beans in my garden. And that glyphosate doesn't just, it actually, they said, well, it doesn't affect humans, but what it does affect is bacteria. So it destroys the good bacteria in your gut and actually leaves the bad bacteria. And what some people don't realize is that like bad bacteria can actually feed on navy beans too, just like good bacteria. So navy beans are really great for good bacteria. But if you get the wrong source and the glyphosate kills the good bacteria, you can end up with an altered microbiome that starts giving you something like diverticulitis or something else, something that's not good. So that glyphosate also kills the bacteria in the soil so that the plants can absorb the minerals that they need. So as I just said, that in Eat to Live, one of the critical, like there's so much that's like is like no brainer, right? Like that navy beans are healthy or whatever. But
Yes,
there
they
are
are.
some critical areas where if we're not careful, we can be nutrient depleted. And this is one of them is in minerals. And you had said something about like women maybe having hard labors or dying in childbirth. A lot
Mhm.
of that is due to the contraction of the uterus not going properly, and that is because of mineral depletion of the uterus. We know that eating 1 to 3 dates a day, dates are extremely mineral rich, can actually correct that. But if we have glyphosate in the soil that's killing the bacteria, it is um, prohibiting the plants from absorbing the minerals they need. So you think like you see the little chart that tells you what's in each food. Well, that's not what's in it anymore because they're growing it on the soil that's depleted because the glyphosate won't let the plant take up the minerals that it needs. So not only is the plant depleted, once we get it in our gut, it's still binding those minerals so we can't absorb it. So I think mineral absorption, whether it's that the plants don't have enough or that our guts, if we're exposed to foods with glyphosate, are not able to absorb it, we're eating the foods, but we're not able to absorb the minerals, is one of the critical dysfunctions. So if we had more natural plants and if we were soaking all our foods, so let me make another like a leap. We were soaking all our foods and had sourdough bread. So we know that many people are gluten sensitive. Gluten is a really big protein that's in bread. And our ancestors and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that we need to sour the bread, which means to allow it to ferment. When we ferment, not only do we break down those big proteins that are really, really hard on our gut, the bread itself produces a bunch of B vitamins, and B vitamins are necessary for brain health, they're necessary for energy, and they're necessary for our mental health. So if we're not fermenting our bread, we are not getting a whole slew of critical B vitamins. And most people aren't fermenting their bread. I did it for 10 years. One of the reasons I did it is I did not want my children to become gluten insensitive. And so I needed to ferment it to break down those hard to digest proteins. And secondarily, it makes it so much more nutrient rich, all those B vitamins. To give you an example, in the South, about after slavery, most basically a lot of Black people were or poor, every race, were eating cornmeal. And corn, if it is not treated properly, there's a process called namixylation or something like that. I can't even know how to say it, but they put some lye in it. But what it does is it liberates
Lie.
vitamins. Yeah, they actually would put sodium, but then they would break it down, right? And then they would ferment it. I don't know. But anyway, the traditional cultures had done this for hundreds, if not thousands of years. But in the cheap, sort of modern society, they weren't doing it. And basically, if they didn't do it properly, that cornbread or that corn that they were eating, the B vitamin B3, which is niacin, which is absolutely
Mhm.
critical for energy, would not be released. And so all of these people were really, really deficient in niacin, and they became schizophrenic, they became angry, they had domestic problems, all because the nutrients were in the food, but they were not able to be liberated because the food was not prepared properly. Now, we're told if we have to eat cornbread, to sour it or ferment it 2 to 3 times and put onions in it, right?
That is in How to Eat to Live. Yes, it is.
So all of that is to try to liberate those vitamins. So in the same way with bread, if we don't ferment it, we're not liberating it, and we're not making it as digestible as it needs to be. In the past, people ate porridge. Porridge was always, traditional cultures have almost always fermented their grains. So they take their grains, like for instance, my children are Ethiopian. They have a grain called teff, and they make it into this kind of soury, I don't know, kind of yogurt bread called injera. They ferment it 4 days. Nobody's fermenting anything 4 days unless it needs it, right? You're not like, yeah, the kids are hungry. Well, in 4 days we'll have bread, right? So if they're fermenting it for 4 days, it's because their tradition tells them that it was needed, and it could maybe be toxic or undigestible if it didn't get those 4 days of fermentation, right, before they make the bread. So porridge was basically fermented grains, whether it was oats, whether it was wheat. And so we don't ferment anything in porridge, right? We don't soak our oats and let them ferment overnight to have oatmeal. So that is, if we did all of that, that would liberate the B vitamins, and it would make the minerals much more absorbable. And in an ideal world, when we can absorb all those minerals, then we are not going to need to get them from meat.
Let me ask you a question. Is it true that for every vitamin there is, I'm going to say, a corresponding mineral that goes along to help the body to be able to absorb both the vitamin and the mineral? Like, so for example, if you are taking a zinc supplement, it is advised that you also take vitamin A. Is that true? Something along those lines?
Well, you do need to balance your vitamins and your minerals, but I would say a better perspective on that is that many of the enzymes in our bodies actually have cofactors. And some of those enzymes or things we can actually think of as vitamins. So like vitamin A and vitamin D are actually hormones. They're actually hormones that bind to your DNA and turn your genes on and off. We think of them as vitamins. It's not like some little vitamin that you kind of need. It's like a hormone that turns your genes on and off directly. It binds to your genes, right? So the way that we think about vitamins is a little bit different than what they're doing in the body. Likewise, so like for instance, we have enzymes that need things like selenium as a cofactor to work, and that's a mineral. And when they have it, that actually helps to protect cell division and prevent mutations and things like that. So many vitamins do need a cofactor, a mineral cofactor, and many times they need magnesium as a cofactor. So magnesium is one of the most important minerals that many people are not getting enough of. I'm not a huge fan of supplementing in general, but magnesium, if that was one that I would pick, it would be vitamin D and magnesium. and vitamin D, I
didn't call them cofactors, but you did answer the question to the affirmative. So I want to ask you something else, and this is actually the crux of this discussion, because I know that a lot of our young people have been diagnosed, and I'm not saying that it's true or false. Mm-hmm. They've been diagnosed to have some sort of mental health issue. And a lot of people attribute it to some social factors, but I really believe that a lot of it is nutritional, coupled with how the brain, or should I say the chemical processes of the body, when it comes down to anxiety, when it comes down to anxiety and grief, and poor nutrition and anxiety and the social issues, it all comes crashing down on them, and it creates a state of what this system of things call mental health problems, no matter what label they put on it. And then they make it worse by giving them
drugs, which
vitamins
often
and
further
different things.
deplete your vitamin and
Exactly.
mineral stores.
It does. So let's
So
talk about
yes,
that for a minute.
your gut microbiome is those B vitamins, and the fermented bread is what produces those B vitamins that are absolutely critical for mental health. And so and like vitamin D is critical for mental health, and most people of darker skin are deficient in vitamin D. And so what happens is you are anxious and you're just not mentally very stable. And so then you make a bad decision and escalates. And then, I mean, it all just sort of spirals, right? Whereas
Hmm.
if you can even get a little bit of solidified with your mood, then things can progress more positively. And then when people have a better mood, they're actually more compliant to getting better foods, right? So when you're anxious and you're barely making it, isn't the time when you're like, let me make a really healthy dinner. You're just going to grab some garbage and put it in your mouth because you just don't have the bandwidth to do that. So I think that is absolutely, and there's actually studies that showed, and this was in the 19th century, that most criminals were nutritionally deficient. And basically a lot of these bad decisions were made from poor nutrition. And when they took at-risk youth and gave them good nutrition, it really got rid of a lot of that at-risk behavior because
Wow.
they were able to think more clearly, process information more clearly, feel more solid in who they were.
When they did this or conducted this particular study and they gave them proper nutrition and they got better, were they in, I'm going to say, for lack of a better word, an isolated environment where there was no
No,
convergence of drama or anything like that? Or did they just give them the food and that's what they ate?
they just gave them the food and it made a difference. They've actually, I think, shown that in prison systems as well.
That if they give them the right food,
Hmm.
but they're
Yeah,
still contained in a particular, I'm going to say, a stress and a stressful environment.
they're still in
For
a
lack
stressful
of a better
environment. So there was a man, his name was Weston A. Price, and he was an American dentist, a white man. And he noticed that Americans had lots of cavities and their bone structure was messed up in their head, and it was all nutritional deficiency. So he was like, even though like we're eating all this white flour, and that's even before they started supplementing the white flour or whatever. So he went around the world to these traditional cultures, black, white, everything in between. And what he found is their diets, whether they were in the Alps and they were eating cheese and rye bread that was fermented, or the Maasai, or New Zealand, all of these different cultures, their food was so much more nutrient rich and it was prepared in specific ways. And after he actually sent all of these samples and tested the food that they were eating for all of these nutrients, then he did an experiment at a school where he took these kids that were basically living off of pastries, like just white bread and jam, right? And those were the foods of commerce because white flour and sugar actually transport in ships really well. So he actually gave them one really good meal with like some stew and a big glass of milk and some vegetables and fermented bread. And some of the kids that were the worst in the class became the top students. And their whole mood changed, their whole like everything changed. And he just that one meal at school. He didn't even change their meals at home or anything. Didn't change anything else. Just one really solid meal.
That one meal a day with the
Yeah, well,
proper
they were probably getting
nutrition.
garbage as well, but one solid meal a day, that had milk and butter, fermented breads. And so those nutrients are so, so critical. And he saw all of those differences. So he also tracked many different families and many different cultures, Eskimo cultures, all kinds of, and what they found is the biggest problems were when these native cultures were exposed to sort of European travelers, right? The commerce.
Mhm.
And they left their native foods and started eating like, white flour and jam and all of this other garbage that wasn't nutritionally rich. But what they found is that the mothers, with every child, they became nutritionally deficient. And usually by their fourth or fifth child, that child was born with birth defects as a result of the nutritional deficiency. Now, we've been told it's genetic, but that's not really true. We've been told that our egg supply runs out, and that's not really true. It's all nutrition, it's all mitochondrial health. The body senses how much energy, how much nutrients it has, and when it doesn't have, it's not being nourished properly, it shuts things down, right? It's not going to allow you to continue childbearing past a certain number of times. And that child, one, we detox now into our children, but you are depleted. Traditional culture spent 2 to 3 years between children in order to replenish those nutrients. And so what he saw was that fourth, fifth, sixth child many times had a club foot, many times had Down syndrome, all of these different birth defects because mom was nutritionally depleted.
What about the nutrient depletion of the male, the sperm donor, so to speak? Because I know that in the tapers that I have, and yeah, it does need to be updated. It was stated that the majority of birth defects is because of an abnormal seed or abnormal sperm from the male. Is that truth or fallacy?
I think it's a combination. I think we are really just beginning to understand the male contribution, and it's incredibly complex. But suffice it to say that the male actually does, and his state of health at the time of conception, the state of his sperm absolutely makes a difference. So, yeah, and we're just finding out more. That's really a new field because mom has the whole egg, right? And so
Yes, she
she has
does.
all the mitochondria, which make the energy. So, and that egg, if it doesn't divide correctly, we know that's what can contribute to things like Down syndrome. So there's a lot more study been done on that, but there's now this whole new burgeoning field. And of course, we kind of knew this with common sense. I mean, it just makes sense, right? That like, you
It
know,
does. It
I mean,
does.
it's not really that deep, but we're finding the actual genetic mechanisms as well. Mhm.
Wow, this nutrition is such a
It's
interesting
everything.
topic for me. I don't know if people, I mean, I
For
will sit
me,
down like at 7 or 8 in the morning, right? And I will start, and then I look up, and it's like 4 o'clock. It's like, oh my God, where where did the time go? Because I get very immersed in it, and I'm
I'm the
just
same
thoroughly
way.
fascinated. Huh?
Yeah,
You
I'm the
was that
same way.
way?
I get totally fascinated. There's so much to learn. And then I almost like forgot to pick up my daughter the other day because I was studying the mitochondria and studying these different things. So that's why I said I've been studying nutrition for, 30 years because there's so much to it. And that's why I think people are surprised to learn that, even though many people would consider me a professional woman, I came out of the workforce when I had my children's. I break the sourdough bread. I still have a huge garden. I grow all my own navy beans. I just made a pot of navy beans, even though I had 2 interviews today, and I cook dinner from scratch, and when I can, I use garden vegetables because, like, when you understand the deepest nutrition, why wouldn't you? Like, that is the most important thing,
It
and
is. Let me ask you something, and I have got to ask this question because quote unquote experts say that butter is not good for you because it increases your cholesterol
cholesterol.
levels.
Mhm.
And it
Well, first
also,
of all,
so let's,
cholesterol.
let's talk about that for a minute because we have a little bit more time, but I'm sorry. So you're asking me to eat something that's made out of hydrogenated oil that et cetera, would
It's
die.
plastic. Plastic.
Exactly. And it does not taste like
Good.
anything.
Mhm.
It doesn't. And I grew up, my mother didn't buy butter. She bought margarine, but that wasn't because of a lot of input from, I'm going to say, the experts, because they
It was
weren't around
cheaper.
at that time. It was because of economics.
Yes,
She
it's
had
cheaper.
she had a lot of mouths to feed,
Mhm.
and it was
And
a lot cheaper for her to buy margarine than to buy butter.
no,
But
and when
please,
I was in graduate school, I was on a very, very limited diet, but I remember I was like, "You study this." I looked at the margarine on the counter because of economics, and I just thought, this is plastic. This is not even real food. Like I can't do this. I'm not going to feed myself this. Like, and that's what we're taught to get the highest of everything. So let's talk about butter, which is one of the most amazing foods ever on the planet. And that's consistent everything with Eat to Live. And cholesterol is actually one of the most centrally important molecules in your body. And it's just been totally demonized. And the association with heart disease is almost incredibly false. In fact, when I was in graduate school 30 years ago, a friend of mine was studying heart disease, and she said cholesterol actually isn't associated with heart disease. It's homocysteine. It actually has to do with your methylation pathway. Now that's a little bit more complicated, but they just latched onto it and just would not let go. But let me tell you about cholesterol first. Every cell in your body needs cholesterol in that cell membrane to make it function properly and to make it resistant to viruses. And you need cholesterol to make all your sex hormones. So if you get on a statin or start eating or making your own cholesterol, then you're not going to, if you're a man, you're not going to have enough testosterone to function. If you're a woman, your sex hormones are going to be glitchy. When the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, we make that the sun hitting the skin makes millions or billions of vitamins, basically, it's probably making them out of cholesterol, just like it makes vitamin D, which is a hormone, out of cholesterol. And the fact that Black people have more cholesterol probably is because of energetically, there probably are conversions going on in the skin that we have not found yet in science. So cholesterol is critically important, and it has very little correlation with heart disease. It's actually when you're inflamed because you're eating too much sugar and too many carbohydrates, your body makes cholesterol to try to mop up the problem. So it's like saying, every time we see a fire truck, there's a fire. So the fire truck must be starting the fire. No, the cholesterol is trying to put out the fire that was started by sugar and too many carbohydrates and diabetes. So we've demonized cholesterol. Instead of reducing inflammation, reducing seed oils, reducing sugar, we just are trying to reduce the cholesterol by taking drugs. And what they don't tell you, especially in men, is low cholesterol is actually more correlated with mortality for older people than high cholesterol, because it is so centrally important to making sex hormones, to making vitamin D, and who knows what other chemicals or vitamins we're going to find that our skin is producing from cholesterol. So I'm a huge cholesterol fan.
Wow. You know what? My cholesterol is fine. When you're looking at labs, and this is something that I am an advocate for now, because when you learn, you try to apply, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend that everyone who has a doctor, you should ask that doctor to do a complete metabolic blood panel.
Yes.
And have them include nutrients to see
Yeah.
how is your nutritional situation on a cellular level. Thank you for providing me with that word, a nutrient profile, to make sure that you have what you need. And I'm saying that because a lot of people go for the ads and eat these beet gummies and do this and do that, and as supplements. But to have too little or too much can cause toxicity in the body. And it's like, for example, there are some people that are diehard advocates for alkaline water.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the reason why. But if there's nothing wrong with your pH balance in your body, why would you keep drinking alkaline water? Because that's going to throw your body off, your pH balance off. It needs to stay within the regulatory limits. Our God is so wise.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a reason why our body temperature is considered normal at 98.6, right? So why would you bother that? What are your thoughts about this supplementation and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad stated in How to Eat to Live? That supplements really, and I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, most of them are garbage. First of all. Yeah, most of them are garbage. They're extracting them from the food. There are times when supplementation is necessary, mostly because our food is so damaged. However, you have to be really careful about the quality of your supplements. I'm not a big fan of supplementation because they can become toxic very easily. For instance, beta carotene is not true vitamin A, and high levels of supplementation are actually correlated with increased cancer risk. Now, you have to look at exactly how those studies are done. And they just did a study that showed that people who took vitamins, were actually more likely to have poor health and more likely to die or something like that. And the thing is, one, a lot of the supplements aren't well formulated and the body doesn't recognize them because they're industrially produced. And things in your body have a right and left hand. And almost always you end up with the left-handed version in your body. When they produce a supplement, they give you both. The body doesn't recognize this one. So what is it going to do with it? It's basically a toxin to it. So the vitamins and minerals, if you're going to use for supplementation, and there are times when that's necessary, have to be produced in a very specific way. So someone asked me about a particular supplement the other day. They thought it was a no-brainer. And I said, no, I don't feel that that's safe, right? So there are some supplements, like I'm a big fan of vitamin D, but it's not actually a supplement. I do a raw cod liver oil. That's a fermented cod liver oil. That's food, right? In a way, I take it as a supplement, right? But it's actually, they took the livers from the fish, threw them in a vat, let it ferment, and skimmed the fat off the top, right? So it's a food. But as opposed to some synthetic vitamin D, right? In milk, they process it and they kill everything. They destroy the vitamin D in it, and then they add back synthetic vitamin D. And they know that, like, if you give a mother synthetic vitamin D supplement while she's pregnant, her baby's head will calcify too much. And the bones are hardening so that, how they're supposed to be in those little fissures so that the skull can kind of collapse and go through the birth canal. Well, it starts fusing, and so the head stays really intact and it can't get through the birth canal. And then you have to have a C-section because mom cannot birth that baby. And that's because of synthetic vitamin D. So I am concerned that we're not getting in nutrients, but my first line, and I live this way too, is to have a very nutrient-rich diet. And I spend a lot of time and energy to make sure that that is the case for me and for my daughter as well.
Wow. That's the whole reason why I'm not a big fan of supplements either, because they're not the real thing. Supplementation, they're synthetically made.
Most
and then they, and the experts will say it's just like what's in your body, and your body won't know the difference. But I beg to differ. Your body does know the difference between real food and poor food. And all you have to do is look at the statistics and look at the demographics and look at what people are eating now in comparison to what they eat then. I saw this this post on Facebook and I laughed, where somebody had posted that a picture of a McDonald's burger and said that I grew up on these. I used to eat these a long time ago, and they, and it's like, no, you didn't. When you
it was different.
Years old,
there might have been real meat in those.
No, that was real meat. This what you're eating now is not in 2026. That's not the same burger.
No, it's not. Remember, they used to use beef tallow to make the fries, which is way healthier than the seed oils that they're using now, right? See, it's much less inflammatory. So,
well, we shouldn't be eating French fries anyway.
Exactly.
And that's, and I have to admit, I eat fries and I eat chips, but I don't eat it as much as I used to, because I have to be honest, because it could be somebody watching and saw me eating some potato chips.
Well, and I think that, like, what I know and what I do, like, I'll go there and I'll be like, oh, but these potato chips have avocado oil. I'm like, okay, you just have to stop. So, I mean, there might have been 10 years where I didn't eat a pizza or any potato chips early in my marriage. And then
for a whole 10 years?
Yeah. And then,
Oh,
before you have kids and you just get overwhelmed, or whatever. But then, like, you fall off the wagon or you decide that this is a
yes,
little
ma'am.
healthier, so maybe you can cheat, and then you cheat a little bit more. And so I'm right there with everyone, like having to get back on the wagon. One of, I think, the benefits of one meal a day is I really do monitor my inflammation and how I feel, because I'm very, very serious about my health. And so I notice more of like, okay, you did this, and then here's how you feel. Is it really worth the inflammation? Is it really worth, and the better and better I feel, actually. And so one of the things that I think we can give ourselves grace with is, like, we teach ourselves what not to do. Like, you're like, you did that and now you feel bad, whether it's mentally or, you know what I mean? And so, and also give ourselves credit for what we're doing right. It's like you eat one meal a day, and sometimes my eating window is a little broader. Maybe it's 4 hours instead of just the two, because life is chaotic, right? Or whatever. Um, but like most days, you're doing one meal a day, between a certain time period. And every month you're doing a 3-day fast. And all of that actually, like, I can't even remember the last time I had McDonald's. It doesn't sound good to me. Right. So a
It's
lot of people
been
eat a
it's
lot
been a
more.
long time
Right.
for me. I have a question
Mhm.
in the comment section that's posed for you. I'm going to let it
Sure.
run across the ticker, but I'm going to read it out loud. Brother Arvins is asking, what are some ways to keep our bodies within the regulatory limits for good health, and how can we properly monitor this in our daily routines?
That's like a PhD thesis. How can we keep it? Well, I mean, if you're practicing eat to live, you're already on the right track. Again, there are some nuances that I think are really going to help us. So I think one of it is to give ourselves grace. At no time in history have we had so many toxins coming at us. And people don't realize that the thing that they hang in their car is an endocrine disruptor that they're breathing in, that's in their body now. And they've got to
You
detox.
mean those little pine tree air fresheners?
Yeah,
Oh
toxic
my
is all get
goodness.
out. Just,
Oh my
the
goodness.
eyelash glue is toxic. The nails are toxic. If you keep your food in plastic, that's toxic. So there's this, and then they're spraying stuff in the air. The spike protein is toxic. You might have a subclinical gut infection. So there are so many biological stressors. So because different people are suffering from different conditions, right? Somebody may have a subclinical gut infection with COVID still, and that could be extremely inflammatory, and they need to get rid of that before they're going to have good health. That's why I actually started Vita, so I can address all of you. Have mold in your home, you're not going to have good health. Like, you may not even know you have mold exposure. Your child may have pandas where it's like an autoimmune kind of thing. So at no time in history do I think we've ever been under this kind of attack on our physical body. And so that's actually my whole mission, is to help us navigate this time. So I think it's important to give ourselves grace and not think that if I just did this harder, I would be healthier. And I'm really grateful that so many of the believers are really honest, and they come to me with their issues. And then I explain why they're still having health problems. And I think it's a relief to them, because it's almost like it can make people question the guidance, right? When the
Mm.
guidance isn't the problem, we just need, again, an additional guidance, additional science, backing up what the messenger said, to help us take a more nuanced view and to meet the challenges that are ongoing.
Wow, that's a lot. You have given us so much information, valuable information. I pray to those who have been listening, because we are at a time, in my opinion, where we have to practice, because of the troubles that are in the world today, nationally, internationally. Our food supply is going to be affected at some point.
Absolutely.
And if we're paying close enough attention to politics, geopolitics, if we're paying attention to how farmers get funding to grow food that people actually eat. It is unnatural to remove livestock from a farm.
Yes, so
That's
that you're not
unnatural.
fertilizing the soil.
Yes, because they fertilize the soil.
Right.
And
And
if
then
you
we
don't
wouldn't
have
be so dependent on Iran if we weren't making our fertilizer out of petrochemicals, right?
exactly.
And this
So
is what
it's written and the handwriting is on the wall.
yeah. So
You
this
know
is
that
what I want to say as well. You know, when the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad went into prison, he didn't continue eating one meal a day. He said, this is not going to support one meal a day. So what I want to say is for each of us is going to be different. Like I have a huge garden. Like some of us are going to be able to maintain and some of us aren't. But one of the things that I consider my mission is to educate about nutrition so that you can understand what you need. So you can like figure out if what you have is going to be adequate or not. So you might have to say, like, for instance, if you have a largely vegetarian diet, you could add some sardines. Now, people would go to Eat to Live and say, well, he says you can have sardines. He says you can't have them. Well, I think it was a packing problem back then. They had histamine. They weren't packed cleanly because he says you can eat Portuguese sardines. So, but we know small fish are permissible. So something like sardines are so nutrient rich that they could take an otherwise inadequate diet and make it extremely adequate. Right?
And that's why there for every the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in How to Eat to Live, Book 1, gave us a lot of nuances.
He did,
like
and many people don't see
sardines, it. Eat the clean one, eat this one, and leave the rest of them alone.
Right.
So because he understands, and he understood then, and he understands now, that there is going to come a time where that may be the only thing that we may have to eat.
Right. And so I want to help people
and different things of that, and different things of that nature, because right now, and what you just said goes along with the studies that I'm doing, that I'm partaking of right now, that nutrition and health is bio-individual. What works for me may not work for Dr. Christina Parks. Right. What works for this person is not going to work for that person, because our genetics are different. We're tied together, but we don't have the same parents. We don't have the same parental bloodline. We don't know what was going on with our great-great-great-great-grandparents on either side of the family. So we're at a loss. And so what works for me may not work for you. You could be allergic to strawberries. They can be the best thing on the planet Earth for you nutritionally, but you can't have them because it creates an inflammatory response inside your body that then where you need antihistamines or histamines or whatever. So
and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad was very clear about histamine being an issue. Most people don't see that, but I see it in the guidance. And so I'm very histamine sensitive. So I avoid most fruits, a lot of fruits. Some are fine, like apples, because anything like strawberries easily gets mold, even if you can't see it. It's just tiny amounts. And then I have a histamine response to it. And so some people can be like, well, you should eat all raw fruits or, whatever it is. And so that's where, or you could have gut dysbiosis where you can't tolerate navy beans. Navy beans are an amazing food, but if you need to heal your gut first, doubling down on like, well, I have to eat navy beans because the guidance says it, that's not an appropriate response. So everyone is coming from a different place. And so that's where we really do have to educate ourselves on the science so that, when all we had was the guidance, that was great. But now when there are people like me to give more guidance on here's the biochemistry of it, we're going to do a lot better in improving people's health and knowing when what we have is sufficient or when we need to add, like, again, for pregnant women, adding maybe some stewed beef to make sure they have the iron, especially again, they didn't know that eating these chips or these seed oils was depleting their minerals, or that the glyphosate in the soil was depleting the iron and the other minerals. So it's complex, and so is the guidance. It seems simple, but it's not.
And that's exactly right. And that's a great segue for us, because now we are out of time. And I enjoyed this conversation so much, because at least now I can actually say that there's some other nerdy person on the planet other than myself that loves this topic of nutrition and how the chemical processes and the biochemical processes work inside of our bodies, and how we have to protect this exquisite, mathematically precise organism if we want life and want it more abundantly. Sister Christina, thank you so much for being here. Those of you who tuned in to listen to this riveting conversation, you can go back and play it again on Closing the Gap Broadcast Network. You all have a wonderful evening. Thanks again, Sister Christina. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, ma'am.
So I'm ending stream now.